Hello and welcome to this month's ID update. Thank you for joining us, whether you're here live or watching after the fact. Welcome. The year is nearly over. There's only this and maybe one more left for 2024. Look at that.
Yeah.
Heidi, how have you been since last time?
I've been well. I've seen you a
I know,
couple of
right? That's
times
weird.
since last time in person. So
Mm.
that's something. But yeah, I've been pretty good. How about you?
Yeah, good. I saw you too. It wasn't some creepy like I'm being followed situation. Like it was, this was what we had. We had DevLearn in Vegas that was very big. I'm still kind of whenever someone says how did you find it, I was like it's huge. Like
It is.
yeah, it was awesome, really cool, lots of great stuff going on. But from like a British perspective coming in, we go, oh, big conference, what, like 300 people? They're like, no, think bigger. Um, so yeah, that was exciting. And then obviously you came over here for LN Connect,
Yes.
which by comparison must have looked very small.
Very, very small, but like so much more targeted quality, right?
Well, we like to think so. Um, no, brilliant. Well, we've had a couple of great weeks for events. Kind of the last few events of the year. I know. I think Learning Guild has one in like the first week of December, which just seems nuts to me. Like maybe it's really popular, but like the idea of a corporate event in December over here is just like no one's going to that. But
Yeah.
I don't know.
I don't know that anyone would go to it anyway.
That's this. I mean, well, it's in this house, Christmas starts at the start of September. So it's already been there for a while. But even so, December is like a hard kind of no, unless there's tinsel involved, we're not interested. On that note, we're with no tinsel attached. We're slightly changing the format of this episode of the show. Less kind of small bitty bits of news. There are a few bits and bobs that I think it's worth shouting about, but then maybe one that we want to discuss a little bit more. I think it's going to be somewhat important over the coming months, maybe. So should we lead off with a couple of like small bits and bobs that we want to talk about, and then just dive straight into the big thing? Do you want to go first with any of the smaller stories?
Yeah, so there was just I mean it's a small story with a big number, but it's 51 mil or 56 million pounds. What is that in US dollars? I'm not sure the conversion rate. It's more,
60-ish.
right? Yeah. To be invested in AI heavy tech, and that tech has to do with talent development, workforce planning, education, and other L&D related things.
Very interesting. And just that's 67.5 million US dollars. So nice little bit of pocket change. Just some money, just enough to keep you going at a weekend.
Yeah, no big deal. No big deal.
Yeah, I mean, and this is interesting because investment. I don't know, like many years ago, like I just thought, oh great, more investment in edtech, the stuff will get better. This is good. There's been a lot of investment in edtech, especially from venture capital groups. It's not really got any better. Arguably, the thing they've got better at is marketing, which I don't think was really their core problem beforehand.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the fact that this is so specifically driven at AI heavy stuff, I don't know. I'm not sure simply the fact that it's AI should be the kind of checkbox required to get access to investment. Like there used to be this thing of like, is it a good idea? Will it solve a real problem?
Right.
And I'm sure they're still considering that. These these VC people make a lot of money. They do it by backing companies that win, etc., etc. But this does feel like a lot of money after a hyper specific technology that I don't know. At the minute, I'm still kind of. It's cool. It's exciting. There's huge potential. I've yet to really have it be like, yes, that has solved a genuine problem that had no other solution. I don't know. I don't know how to feel about this, is my honest answer.
Yeah, well, and the article is trying to kind of spin it as we're doing this, like we're we're using AI to make people problems less difficult, right? And whenever we kind of get into that area, that's where I kind of get into like the, oh no, like do the HR lawyers know about this? Like we kind of using personality tests to hire, and are we using AI recruiters to read through applications and things like that? And then we get all sorts of problems and issues.
Yeah, I'm just not. I don't know. It strikes me as a running in the wrong direction piece. But does, I think, set up my first mini story that sits together quite nicely with this, which is another AI piece. And actually isn't specific to L&D, but I think is an interesting reminder of what this space looks like. So this is the Sora is ready for some beta testing. So for those who haven't tracked it, this is OpenAI's like video generator that will be part of ChatGPT to go along with DALL-E for the images they do now. They decided to road test it with a whole bunch of like AI and digital artists. Logical sense, they'll have some idea of what they want to achieve, blah, blah, blah. Now, everyone has a different view on this story, and my coverage will reflect my view. Because I think I performed, I think an eye roll would not be the correct term. It's more like an eye somersault when I saw this. Almost immediately, a group of these artists decided they were going to take this extremely, new piece of technology and just leak it for general public use because they were in a strop about not being paid as a beta tester. Now, they weren't promised to be paid. They were told it was not a paid thing. They were there to test it under, one would assume, quite a strict NDA, as we've all experienced, either through some form of work in our lives. And their thing is that they are not free bug testers, PR puppets, or training data. So actually, as a beta tester, you are all those things. That's exactly what you signed up for. Just for the record, if anyone's unsure. And they put this big thing about how they've leaked it and they're the good guys, and OpenAI are trying to art wash their product. This is another. Again, we're straying into opinion rather quickly here. We don't need any more terms like this. No one's art washing anything. It's an AI video generator. There are plenty already on the market. If I go down to Hobbycraft, I can still buy paint and canvas and paint myself a lovely picture. It's not destroyed art. It's not going to destroy art. Let's move on. They've come out with this great big kind of, this is disgusting and blah, blah, blah. We should be paid for our time and effort. No one really pays beta testers. You were given a choice as to whether or not to do this. Like, no one showed up at your door and held you at gunpoint to test the new version of this software. You were given an opportunity and you chose to take it, and now you're in a strop about it, and so you've decided to leak a technology to the public before it's ready to go to the public. I don't want to be the guy on YouTube takes the side of a big tech company. But are you serious? Like, there are so many things to actually be concerned about with this new space in terms of ethics and data acquisition and attribution when your work is used to inform a model and all this sort of stuff. This is just performative bullshit. Like, this is just grabbing a headline and breaching a really simple NDA you didn't have to breach. Because I've got to assume this is going to court at some point.
Well, and I'm guessing there's more than one person involved in this, yes?
Yeah, well, this is it. There's a whole group of them. I'm trying to find the. Of course, a lot of it exists on Reddit. The wonder that it is. Of course. That's the general home of open letters that have no impact on the world and all that kind of thing. The end of the story was because of this. The whole thing went away. The entire beta tester program was closed down and Sora's gone. So, hey, well done. You killed the technology that people were otherwise quite excited about. Great job. Like, the only thing that struck me is, like, imagine being one of the other artists that didn't do this and was excited to test this and get to be the first people in order to use it, and it's taken away from you because of these dickheads going, well, I know better than these other, It's like, come on, real, like, don't like it, don't do it. I don't know.
Yeah, I agree. I think I think when we start getting to that point, we're going to see, like, if we continue to see that, we're going to see less and less vendors beta testing with their actual users, which is a massive problem. And which is, as we know, a problem in our industry, right? Like a problem in just even the marketing in our industry, let alone the beta testing. Like we're not even, the people who are using the tools in our industry are rarely the ones who are listened to first in the grand scheme of things. So this is not helping that issue, you know?
Yeah, it's tricky, right? Because generally speaking, I'm very much on the side of all work should be paid for. But is beta testing work? Are you a professional beta tester? Probably not.
And is payment in the form of free product acceptable payment? Because I would argue that in today's society where everything is subscription based, that is a form of payment and has a very real number attached to it, you know?
Do you know what this is it? Like, I did a series of sponsored videos very early in this year with iSpring. And they sponsored and they gave me as well as the sponsorship for the videos, they gave me access to the tool for a year. That's hugely valuable in my day-to-day profession and enables me to make money. Like, that's a really valuable tool. Then the flip side of that is, like, I did some, here we go. I do some more nerdy stuff on the side, and I got sent this, which is a box of toy soldiers to check out and try and see what I thought of. Now, that is a form of payment. I know because I'm legally obliged to declare it as such, both in terms of my tax return and in terms of disclosing that the video is sponsored when I put the video out. Sure. Now, that's, it's very difficult, especially in the art world, where I get that for a long time there was this, don't pay artists with exposure. Totally agree. If you want to commission a piece of art, you should pay for a piece of art. Absolutely, 100% on board. This was an opportunity to be among the first people in the world to get your hands on a brand new piece of technology that is going to disrupt the space in which you work. I would suggest the exposure that comes with that is not just a LinkedIn post or a thing on Twitter.
Yeah.
That's pretty huge. Because they also had this thing where they were all going to like create a short film with it, basically. And then the best ones were going to be selected and aired at like a AI film festival. That's pretty huge.
That's massive. Yeah.
I don't know. Part of me does just feel that this is, I don't know, just very performative is my gut feeling. And again, like, I think just destructive and bad for the space in the long run. Because like, I think you're spot on. If I were at OpenAI, I would be sat there thinking, why the fuck could we beta test anything ever again?
Yeah.
Because like whether they win the argument or not is an irrelevance here. Like that technology is so new. If it gets leaked, it's pretty destructive to their business.
Yeah. And I mean, at the end of the day, they have the money and the tools and the profit margin to be like, we're shutting down an entire arm of our of our business, right? And they can and they will, just to punish people because they can.
Yeah, I feel like that. Yeah, it's sad. That's like, I seem to be on the side of the corporate overlords today, but that's just the way it's going to be, unfortunately. There we go.
I don't think we've gone to the dark side.
Indeed. So there's our super upbeat start. The show going really well. The other, do you have another small story you want to bring up, or are you ready to go into the big story?
The only thing that I wanted to bring up was give me like a major takeaway, something from DevLearn and Ellen Connect.
My second small story is actually from Connect, so that's perfect. My major takeaway from DevLearn, that's interesting. Oh, I almost want to say it's the same thing from both, but in different ways.
Okay.
So the thing that struck me at DevLearn actually struck me in the expo. And to be clear, conference sessions, cool, really good. Thoroughly enjoyed most of the ones that I went to. You're never going to enjoy every session you go to because sometimes it just doesn't quite align with what you want, right? That's fine. The keynotes were weird. I enjoyed, I enjoyed all the keynotes, but I've said this before. I have a real issue with keynotes that have no fucking relation to what I'm there to do. You could argue they all had very very stretched relations to what we were there to do, but they didn't hit the mark for me, shall we say. We had very entertaining and inspirational on day one with some art, phenomenal painter, phenomenal speaker, no link to the world of L&D, I'm afraid. Fine. Second day, very political. Again, I thoroughly enjoyed myself. Absolute whale of a time. She took the mick out of people who had sort of voted Trump, then went after anyone using the term gamification. Best moment of the entire event for me. A major topic of the talk was penis trees. It was everything you want from a day two keynote at an event, of course. And then day three, we had like a social media STEM influencer. Again, phenomenally interesting person. The message was go away and try different things with AI, which I kind of feel like was the message 18 months ago. And now it needs to be, okay, you've tried things out. Now is the time to start looking for real value. But his content area really is STEM, and that's all right. It's not just kids, but it's predominantly aimed at younger people, not professional audiences. So I can see why there was the misalignment. But again, when that's the closing message, I don't know, they were the one element that for me just didn't land. But actually, my takeaway was from the expo. Anyway, sorry, that was a very long-winded way of getting there. My takeaway from the expo was, oh my God, why is technology standing still? Like, there were some cool new shiny elements involved in the expo, but the vast majority of it could have been there before COVID. Like in terms of the platforms, the authoring tools, the topics being talked about.
Yeah.
Like it was very much like, where's the new thing that I'm walking away going, oh my God, that unlocks this new potential? Not one thing from the expo. And actually that's been true all year. I've got to be honest.
I agree.
Like, yeah, that was my big takeaway from that. I think that surprised me. I was looking for a wow moment and I didn't quite get that.
Okay. That's fair. That's very fair.
And from Connect, it was the same but different. Not the technology, but the topics. The conversations we're having are good conversations. They're the right conversations. They're the same conversations that we were having 5-6 years ago. Now, the flip side here is I'm not convinced that is a bad thing. Because the technology, like surface level, consumer technology is changing a lot. The working environment is changing a lot. The societal environment is changing a lot. But if we're still having the conversations around impact and culture and these things, yes, it means we haven't solved the problem yet, which is maybe not great, but it does at least mean that these things haven't evaporated, as some earlier topics have. Gamification is a good example of this. Gamification was everything at every conference for a couple of years and then vanished. It hasn't come back. That tells me it was a bit of a flash in the pan, whereas culture, inclusion, performance, demonstrable value, measurement, metrics, these things, yes, they were being talked about 10 years ago, and they've been talked about every year consistently since, and hopefully continuing. So to me, it's becoming easier actually to identify this is real, and these other things that are popping up and then vanishing, these are the side quests, the attractions that drag you away from the main thing you're there to do, you know?
Yeah.
But that's me. What about you anyway? What did you walk away? So I'm guessing it might be slightly different.
Yeah. Well, I mean, from DevLearn, I had been a couple years ago, and I think you're really right about the lack of innovation, really. It was more so like quantity over quality. So it was like instead of 2 years ago where you would have like an LMS or an LXP or whatever the hell they want to call it to try and make it sound really cool. Now you have 7 of them, right? And before you had a one translation AI translation company, and now you have 5 of them. And so it was just kind of and like very competitive. Like I was walking with a friend through the expo, and some person was hollering so borderline rudely, trying to get our attention and get us to let him scan our badges. And then of course, like with the whole, they scan your badge and now they're calling nonstop, and they're blowing up your phone. And even when you say, oh no, now is not a good time, or just ignore them entirely, like it just never ends. And it just has me going like, is this really the best way for us to do things, right? Big giant expo that's just very competitive. Plus, finding out, I didn't know this, but that the exhibitors have to pay regular price tickets to get into the sessions, which I have a massive issue with, because now the people who are selling us the products that we're using every day aren't really getting involved in the conversations that we're having that are the most important part of the conference, right? And then to kind of have all of these different competing, it's just, I enjoyed Ellen Connect a lot more because it was smaller, and the conversations were able to be more nuanced because of it, and were higher quality. And like you said, it was the more timeless things that we were discussing. Like, okay, yeah, a bunch of companies in the US have gotten rid of DEI, but we're still talking about inclusion and accessibility, and they're still just as important. So, it was, for me, the benefit of both, the massive benefit of both, was just getting to meet people that I only meet virtually, and seeing people and talking to people. And the real value is always in the conversations that happen in the in-between. And that's where I really took most of the value.
And I think that's true of all events. And I think that's the difficult thing, isn't it? Like, This was my last year kind of chairing the network, so Connect will be a bit different moving forwards. But when I took it over, the one bit of advice I got was like, remember, we're the sideshow to the conversations that happen. It's like, that's really interesting that this whole event, like these speakers who really know their stuff, the debates, anything we do is actually just there to create a space in which other people talk to each other. It's like, that's really difficult actually to organize and think about. So how do we run the day without running it? And it's, I like, hats off to people who do it all the time, because it's a lot. And that's why I was like, I think, like, whilst I have those, my critique around keynotes and stuff for DevLearn, I still think it was a phenomenal event. I walked away with kind of like, I've got so much to think about and all that kind of thing. And a lot of that is personal preference. Like, I know some people that absolutely loved the keynotes, or some of the keynotes, and not other, all the sorts of things. So yeah, it's I don't know. I feel like events are a funny space right now. But I think broadly I'd agree. I prefer smaller events. I got to be honest.
Yeah.
I think having had a taste of ATD and DevLearn now, they are really cool. They're really fantastic, and it's lovely to be able to go and meet kind of people from the US side of L&D that otherwise never get to see. But for me, they are too big to get enough value out of it to make like 3 or 4 days worth of value. That makes sense?
Yeah.
Cool. So with that then, our main topic, and the reason we kind of changed the format a little bit this month, 'tis the season for reports and research. Heidi, do you want to kick us off on this one?
Okay, so this topic was started because people started sending me I believe the official title of this particular report is The Future of Instructional Design. So this is a report that was published by Synthesia, but we are in the end of the year trends reports, industry state of the industry report. All of these different companies, all of these different consulting agencies are going to be releasing similar reports. But I kept getting sent this particular report because people know I have a background in, research as a PhD of instructional design, and have, taken all the delicious quant and qual stats courses that we have to take as part of our rigorous obstacle course that is doctoral work. And so they were like, this report's a problem, right? And so, yes, but that's to say that many reports like this are a problem, and a lot of them have the same exact holes. And that's really what we want to kind of talk about today, is like what to look for. What are some of those holes, right? So do you want me to just dive right in? Do you want me to dive into the specific report? How do you want to handle this? Broad to specific, specific to broad?
I'm going to say, let's go broad to specific. But
Okay.
I want to start, because I feel like this is going to get harder and harder as this go on. I want to start with a single point of kudos to Synthesia for this report. Because I feel like it's important to call out the good and the bad. And the one thing I really liked is the fact that I could go to their website, read the whole thing. It doesn't ask for my details, nor make me download it. It's hard to overestimate or overstate, how big of a deal that is. Because I've worked in various vendors, and the idea of releasing something that, regardless of any issues it may have, has taken a significant amount of time and work, and not gating it behind personal detail capture is not an easy sell to many businesses. So credit where it's due. Someone has put forward a very strong argument and really pushed to make this available without gating it. That might end up being where my positive notes end, but I do not feel that is a small note. That in of itself says a lot about, I don't want to read too much into it because that might be even increasingly unfair, but someone has a very good kind of, I would argue, ethical point that they're standing on there, because it's not a given. Certainly, I've not come across it anywhere I've not just worked, but anywhere that I've spoken to. This would be like, it's gated, 100% gated content. There wouldn't even be a discussion. So yeah, not to overdo it, and it doesn't excuse anything else, but that is cool. Moving on, Heidi, take us through.
Sure. So, I mean, I guess my first and my biggest problem with this is we have a great sample size, right? We've talked to close to 500. I forget what the exact sample size is, but close to 500 instructional designers. But there's where the problem begins, is that a third of these people that have been included in this survey are SMEs who design courses as part of their role. Now, where I come from and how I've been prepared in this field, SMEs and instructional designers are not the same thing. And while we might get people in instructional design who come from that world and who have been SMEs in the past, a SME and an instructional designer have a very, very different function and a very, very different skill set. Tom, I believe there's video of you very recently saying that you feel that you are far more skilled than a SME to create content, or something close to that. I might be putting words in your mouth here.
It's almost like that's my job, and that their job is not to do that. Like, it's craziness, right? Imagine if you spent time focusing on a skill set, you might be better at it or have a different view of it than those who haven't. It's just a crazy thought that occurred to me,
And you might be more likely to use an AI tool to help you do something that you're not familiar with doing and not used to doing, right? So see how our data starts just a little bit getting skewed, and then the branches of where the data can be skewed and get really nasty just kind of go off from there, right? We're not even starting right. We're not even talking to the right people, because now as me, as an instructional designer, you've lost me, because now, as the report goes on, it starts calling all these people instructional design professionals. I don't want a SME to be called an instructional design professional. I've worked really fucking hard to be that professional. And it is insulting to what we do to lump people in because they create content and they create courses. And that's the thing that I've been trying to say over and over, that education creation and content creation are not the same. And when we treat them the same, we run into problems like this.
Yeah, I mean, right in the first bit, it also says that also included are directors, freelancers, founders, and professionals in other roles. Yeah, it's, and even that, like, other roles such as learning and development managers, learning experience designers, and e-learning developers. Now, I get that, like, I'm going to pick on the e-learning developer one just because it's the one that I often have the most objection with, but the kind of merger of that into instructional designer as a role. And I get that instructional design and instructional designer are phenomenal SEO terms. We actually had a weird conversation about this, that they've exploded on YouTube.
Yeah.
Thus, you may have noticed on the channel, no more instructional design driven titles. It's because no one can find them. We've changed that. So I get it from that regard, but from data, like, I would expect, and as we go through this, I guess you'll see some of the questions that are in there. I would expect wildly different responses from instructional designers and e-learning developers, because their job is wildly different. Like, when an instructional designer says they're using, I don't know, a video generation tool, I'm a bit kind of like, I'm sorry, why, what for? Surely a developer or content developer would deal with that, or an e-learning developer would deal with that. Why aren't you mostly spending your time in Word, or your equivalent of word processing software? Yeah, I don't know. It, like you say, from the very start, it seems a little bit funky in terms of the roles. But
yeah. Well, and when I was doing my research, I ran into the same problem, right? Because we call instructional designers a lot of different things. And so in my research, I called out, like, I'm interviewing instructional designers or people whose main functionality is that, and who is just called something else, but is a, like, widely accepted substitute, right? Like learning experience designer, or I talked to a couple instructional systems designers, right? E-learning designer, learning solutions designer. There's a lot of names, but subject matter expert is something entirely different. And if we're talking about the future of instructional design, like, to call out, hey, a lot of SMEs are creating courses is one thing. To include them in our sample size and base future trends and findings based on them is a misstep, in my professional opinion.
Cool. Okay. So what's, I guess, from your perspective, assuming this was the data set that you've got, how would you prefer to then see it handled? Would it be completely strip out the SME results and just don't use them? Or what would be your kind of ideal world forwards using this data set?
Yeah, I think that we need to have criteria around these things to fully understand them, right? Like, if we want to understand the future of instructional design, like, yes, we can't just talk to people who have 10 plus years of experience, right? Like, that's not going to tell us what the future looks like. But we should be talking to people, like people doing the work, and then the leadership. And we should be talking to those two groups of people separately. If you want to talk to SMEs who design courses to figure out why they're doing it and what they're doing, that gets treated as a completely separate data set, right? That gets broken out into its own data and gets broken out into its own. And, like, it's a really handy data set to have. Like, it's a really good way to cut the data to see, who's more efficient, who's doing a better job, who is using more tools, right? Because what we may find out is that the SMEs are creating things faster, but they're not as effective, right? Or that they're, creating things faster, but are way more convoluted because they've got all of the SME's knowledge from their head in it, and it's not being presented in a simplified way, and it's not useful, and all of these things.
Well, it's funny actually that when I did late 2023, I did the AI adoption survey, and split the data in a similar way, but actually didn't expect to. But when I got the results in, there was such an insane difference in response between two groups, which was people in senior leadership positions and people who were like business contributors. We had to split the data. I say I had to split. There's no one else involved. I had to split the data because otherwise nothing made sense. Like they both at various points skewed the data so massively in this weird split way because fundamentally they had a different view of reality. Largely because senior leaders seem to be untethered from it most of the time, and those on the ground are just wanting to cry under their desks. But that in data form, that looked like AI was going to be everywhere within the next 6 months, a la senior leadership, and people on the ground going, sorry, what? But they're just zero. But basically, how do I feel about it? Yeah, really excited or a little bit concerned, somewhere in that ballpark. But actual adoption, almost nothing. Meanwhile, senior leaders are like, oh yeah, my business is full of AI. It's like, really? Because your people can't seem to find it. It's really strange. But that became an interesting discussion in of itself by splitting the data set, right? Leaving it all as one would have just created this muddle of, I don't know, there's some stuff, I guess, maybe, but some people do and some people don't.
Yeah.
It's a bit strange.
Yeah, well, and I think there's, to your point, there's stuff in this survey that I imagine is victim to that, right? Like there's a how instructional design success is measured section where learner performance is number one, like by a lot, in a way that makes people who talk to L&D professionals as their job every day go, what the hell are you talking about? Learner performance. Like that's the dream. That's the goal. That's the thing that people say that they can't get support and buy-in to measure all day, every day. But when you look
businesses, I want to speak to them. They're clearly
exactly. Introduce me to all these respondents. But when you look at the definition, they're counting student grades as learner performance. So they're counting quiz scores as learner performance, which, as we know, is not in a lot of cases indicative of their on-the-job performance. But they also define it as on-the-job performance, changes in on-the-job performance or student grades. So they're actually equating the two. And then if you look, business impact and behavior change make up about 5% of respondents. And that's where I would say that true performance is being measured there. It's by the ROI on the business and observable changes in learner behavior post-training is how they define behavior change.
That is a little like seeing that put forward that, and there's a couple of things that seeing that makes sense in terms of the numbers when you understand that's what it says. But when you just read the top bit, which is, and this is the other thing, right? There's this problem of people tend to read the top line and not all the detail. I think people writing this stuff know that. Of course. So they make the top line read a certain way, shall we say.
Yeah.
There's a reason this is called the future of instructional design and not Synthesia's L&D survey 2024. It's all kind of marketing to an extent. My other point of concern is the use of the word student, because that makes me think, does this data contain a measurable or significant amount of education or higher education backgrounded responses? Because if it does, that makes this really, really complicated, because I do get the desire to merge the thoughts between that world and the corporate L&D space, but they are not the same. And this isn't a teachers aren't instructional grant. It's not. The actual context of working in them is different. The budgets are different.
Correct.
The requirements are different. Someone getting a good grade is a total irrelevance in the I don't care even slightly about their grade in the corporate world. Whereas in the education world, it's kind of a big deal. You know, you could argue it's the entire point of the system.
Yeah, and if you consider what, oh my gosh, if I could find the words, what is a common situation in which subject matter experts would be creating courses when they're a faculty member at a higher education institution?
Hadn't clocked
so
that. That's a really good point.
Well, I didn't until you said that. So how many faculty members are being included in this survey? How many directors of L&D, right? Like, this survey is like problematic from point one. And honestly, I didn't want to say this earlier, but let's bring this up now. Is if it's a marketing, like you said, it's about marketing, right? It's called the future of instructional design for a reason. But what if the reason that it's not paywalled is because it's meant to be largely disseminated? The goal is for it to be largely disseminated without any caution. Like, just give it to anybody because we want the exposure, right? Like, what if it's about the exposure of the report, right? But we also have to talk about the most popular authoring tools part of this too.
I funnily enough, I've got that graphic open. Let me share that, because I feel like it is worth some discussion, don't you?
Yes.
Right, let's bring that open and share that. Look at this masterpiece of accuracy, shall we say. Let's keep making that bigger. I mean, the one thing they've got right, headline-wise, articulate dominates. Won't argue with that.
True, of course, yes. No argument here.
Do you want to go first?
Okay, so first and foremost, I'm interested in how this information was presented to respondents, because it feels like it might have been a drop down. I can't confirm, of course, but if I was the person collecting this data, Articulate 360 and Storyline, while they're not exactly the same thing, like, Storyline exists within Articulate 360. Articulate Rise exists as part of Articulate 360, right? So, like, that's like saying Adobe Creative Cloud and then having Photoshop and Audition separately on the bottom. Like, it doesn't make sense. Like, throughout this entire report, the data is just telling me over and over that someone who does not understand our field is trying to speak as if they are very educated and an expert in our field. It's like, like somebody who watches a lot of medical shows, like pretending they have medical knowledge and talking when they hear like their nurse friend talk. Like, it's like one of those scenarios. Or like, when the girl that from your high school class buys a really nice, expensive camera and starts branding herself on social media as a photographer, but like is really, truly just a hobbyist. Like, that's what this feels like. Like, it's like your uncle's cousin trying to describe what you do for a living, right? Like, it's that type of thing where it's like missing the mark. But more importantly, and this is when you look at the proper report, there's like a PDF version of the report that mentions they've excluded TechSmith products entirely from this list. Like, Camtasia, Snagit are not on here, period. End of sentence. And I would wager a guess that Camtasia is probably above iSpring on this breakdown. But like, also how are we defining authoring tool? Because that in and of itself is all over the place. Like, these tools one tool on this list cannot do what another tool can do, right? Like, sure, they can all create e-learning if we're saying like electronic learning in like the e-learning proper definition. But like,
that is not the commonly used definition. Let's be honest. It's
right.
Not, we say e-learning, we think of a SCORM file. Let's, rightly or wrongly, that is the the zeitgeist, as you would say,
Sure.
or of the term e-learning. The inclusion of Moodle on this really bothers me. Moodle is not an authoring tool. I'm sorry, it's
It's
not.
not. No.
And my other like silly gripe here is when I look at Word way down here, and when I look at PowerPoint.
Yeah.
Word and PowerPoint are, I would argue, the two tools that would give Articulate a run for their money.
Agreed.
Because I can't think of a single L&D function that I have ever seen that does not use them to author content.
Agreed. Absolutely. Like the fact that these categories weren't well placed or well and now that we're discussing it, I feel like maybe it was an open answer question, which is why we've got such a variety, especially if we go back to the point that you don't have the right people reporting this data, right? Then that explains why we've got answers all over the board. And are the SMEs using Rise? Probably. Are the SMEs the ones saying Moodle and Brightspace, which are both LMSs? Probably. It's just, if we eliminate all of the actual, or if we keep only the authoring tools that are on here, there's like a handful, I want to say. Like half of them would be eliminated.
I mean, I think I would make an argument that most of them, bar the two LMSs, which you can use to author content, but again, they seem off to me personally. But and the exclusion of, because I was wondering, like, how is no TechSmith product on here? The deliberate exclusion is very interesting, especially as they've literally just launched their Synthesia competition, obviously, with their own avatars. Can't help but notice here, there's literally no other avatar-based company on here, not a single one.
No, and we know they exist. Yeah,
yep.
They're out there. They exist. They're gaining steam.
And it is plausible that given the inherent there's a certain person that's going to respond to this, and a lot of them are going to be Synthesia customers.
Of course, because that's probably how they sent out the survey. That's the other thing. They don't say how the survey was sent out. But if I was a person who worked for Synthesia, the first people I would send this survey to would be all my customers, because how are they going to answer? And that's what we call response bias. And it's prevalent in all of these types of reports, that response bias.
Because I had a quick look through the online version. I haven't had a look at the PDF, to be entirely honest. Is there anything in that, because I didn't notice it in this one yet, about kind of here are the problems or the things you need to worry about as such in this survey? Because that's something I noticed a lot, and like something that I put in the AI one when I did it was like 3 pages at the start, basically of saying, here's all the shit I didn't think about when I was writing the questions, but in analysis I've realized, whoops, this should have been a key consideration. Like, for instance, I didn't ask, where in the world are you based? AI is actually a really expensive technology, even though we don't all, at the minute, it's a lot of free stuff. Once you get to like enterprise level, it ain't free. There was I suspect in the data, some of the big swings in response had a geographic kind of underlying cause, but I had no way of knowing that because I didn't capture that data. Similarly, my approach to getting things was I posted it on LinkedIn and lots of L&D community groups, and therefore got, again, a very specific type of L&D respondent who is active on L&D social media.
Yes.
It was quite interesting. So was there anything like that in any of the versions of this that you've
Not
seen?
that I saw. They did mention that they excluded Camtasia, but they didn't provide a reason why they excluded Camtasia.
Interesting.
I'd actually be interested to hear what someone from Camtasia thinks about it, because if this was like the, being socialized as much as it is, and I was deliberately left off, I'd be pretty annoyed. But if you go to that number 3, that's another great, it's an interesting one.
That is very interesting. Yeah, I mean, I don't have any access to the data here, right? None at all.
Mhm.
But either, oh, hang on, that's percentage of respondents, not straight numbers. So here we go, 60-ish% of respondents have used Synthesia. Synthesia is quite a niche tool. I don't think I'm wrong in saying that.
No, I don't think you're wrong.
Especially to have used it in a professional setting. Like, this isn't have you logged in and created a video. This is based on this title anyway, it is, there we go, their impact on instructional. Perfect. Okay, yeah. So we are talking AI tool ability to, okay, it's a bit of ad space there. Lovely. Yeah, it doesn't, this just doesn't sit right. One, that these are only less than 20% have used a tool other than these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. If you're responding to this survey, I don't buy that. I got to be honest.
Well, and
equally,
the fact that you're 3 times as likely to use Synthesia compared to any other AI tool that's not listed. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, it's, again, one of those things where I think people aren't even aware of things that they're using that either involve AI or, utilize it in some way, right? Yeah, I just, front to back, just have a real problem with all of the information here. And it's one thing to get data that's kind of skewed to benefit a company and to say, like, hey, or even to do like a trends thing, right? And to say, like, hey, skills are super in, right? Like, another report I read was Udemy Businesses, which is another eye chart, right? But they're like, skills are in, and the best way to do that is through courses on Udemy. Of course. Of course they will. But they at least kind of make the case for skills and then show how it's tied. Here, it just feels like a bad handling of data from the very beginning to the very end, and an unclear communication of data here, which is problematic for me.
Because I guess my question, I'd be interested to hear your take on this, because I'm not sure if we covered it at the start. When it comes to like the conducting of this kind of survey and research and the reading and understanding of it, you're very much the expert in this situation, and I am the lay person who comes at these things and tries to use them in my work. But to me, this would be a much more useful gathering and presentation of information if these were not specific tools, i.e. ChatGPT, Synthesia, MS Copilot, but instead were a large language model, an avatar generator, a voiceover generator, a graphics generator. See, that to me would be a useful measurement of technology impacting instructional design, as opposed to who is winning the current marketing competition for getting numbers of users. But that's only my thinking. Am I wrong? Because there might be an argument for this.
No, absolutely not. Because I think what I think you're highlighting is, again, the lack of understanding of instructional design that's at the heart of this report, right? Okay. Because there aren't even, the buckets were not even created, right? We are jamming things into content authoring tools that aren't. We are jamming people into our profession that aren't. We are, creating paths for this like narrative, right? Like, I guess my problem is, as an intelligent human being, an intelligent woman who went to school for a really long time and studied this field very intently, to have someone try to hoodwink me and tell me that, the product, the narrative is such because, and change the narrative to suit their product, rather than suiting their product to help me as an instructional designer, right? Rather than creating a product that's actually going to make me faster, that's actually going to make me more efficient. I have a whole blog on the Useful Stuff website about why talking head AI videos are not the future of L&D. And I think they're trying real hard to be. And I think this is one of the ways. But again, to your point, if they had something like, here are the authoring tools that are popular. Here are the AI video tools that are popular. Here are the graphic design tools that are popular. If they had better planned out the survey to begin with, I think they could have gotten good data, right? Like, I think if you and I put our heads together, we could create a really cool survey, right? Oh no, is that going to be on our to-do list for early 2025?
No more
Maybe.
to-do
I
list
don't
items.
know.
2025 is full at this point. The to-do list is as long as it needs to get. But equally, like, just on that, and I don't want to derail this too much, but I've worked in a couple of places where that has been discussed. Should we do some survey, some research? And I always love the idea. Love it. I even did that AI one as a standalone. That wasn't for a vendor. That was just me. And I thought, I'd quite like to do these. I'd like to get started doing them. There's a reason I never followed up with another one. Once you step into that world, from my view, I think there's a risk of doing tremendous damage if you put something out that is not accurate. Now, I try to be careful broadly in videos, in these conversations, to be about right in what I say. But no one is watching me on YouTube and going, this is guaranteed to be 100% factual with all the necessary context. It's an opinion thing, right? I try and do tutorials. It's the best thing that I know how to do. And sometimes I get stuff wrong, and I don't worry about that too much anymore. But when you author a report or conduct a survey and report that back to the industry as some kind of data-informed or data-driven fact, I think there is actually quite a high bar that you have to hold yourself to. And the amount of time and effort and the skill set required to do that, I decided was beyond me. And so I shouldn't do it. And that's kind of been my argument in businesses as well. It's a case of, if we're going to do this, it has to be done in this way. Do we have that skill set? If not, we need to hire it. It's a really expensive skill set. Like commissioning someone like Ipsos to do a poll is significant six-figure sums. As it should be, because they'll do a really good job of it. It will have, statistical accuracy, but all this stuff. And this maybe is why when we see these business-driven ones, we see this instead. Is that, are these the kind of common things that we don't see in those independently conducted ones? Or do you think they still exist, but are different? Or look different, I guess, maybe, or feel different?
I think...
Sorry, that was a very long and rambling question.
No,
what do you think?
No, it's a good one. It's complicated, right? Because I think there are holes in the research everywhere, right? Something that became very clear to me as I was finishing my doctoral degree was like that no one was really closely checking on my data that I was reporting on. And it could have been because I was doing a more qualitative type of study, right? It could be that it was more of a thematic analysis, but nobody really was like, are we sure she interviewed all these people she said she interviewed, right? Like, right. I could have, if I was smart and covered my tracks well, basically fabricated all of the interviews. And when that hit me as a researcher, as a doctoral student, I was like, how much research is out there where someone did that? It becomes a very eye-opening thing to go, like, I had to get basically sign off that a colleague in my field listened to a sampling of my interviews to make sure they were legit. Like, I sent him 3 audio files and I just said that he did it. Like, that was good enough. Right. So like there were so many places where I could have lied, could have manipulated data, could have fabricated data, that really became clear to me as I was going through the process and made me go, wow, we really need to be careful about how we deal with, treat, read, process all of this data, because, one of the biggest things is that we look for in research, in information literacy is it repeatable? And the reason we look for that, and we call it reliability, is because of those holes, right? Because if you and I can't go out and get similar results to the survey that we are not going to do in 2025, if we both go out and do it in our respective corners of the world, yeah, there's going to be some like geographical anomalies. But overall, we should be finding like generally the same thing. And then the other part is once you start doing research, once you start doing interviews or surveys, what you're looking for is you start getting the same answers. Nothing new is really coming up. So if you have open-ended answers like this, you know, the goal is for them to be finite enough that you start hitting that point of repeatability, right? And that was something that I ran into in my PhD research, interviewing instructional designers and like doing thematic analysis. After about 15, I stopped getting any new themes, which is what you want, right? Like that's what tells us that we're getting good data, that we're getting consistent data, that we're getting data that's going to be helpful, right? That's my long-winded answer to your question.
No, that's that again. This is the kind of stuff where I think, as a reader and consumer of these things, you look at it and think, oh, okay, well, there's the finding, there's data, blah blah. It's those kinds of considerations you don't necessarily go down the road of thinking of,
Sure.
right? I think it's very easy to think, oh, well, all these people doing these reports, they know what they're doing. And for me, literally, until I went, I'll author one, only then did I really realize, oh my fucking God, this is an absolute kind of death trap of a thing to try and create. So hats off to those who do it and do it well, I must admit. For the bravery, if nothing else. Even if you do it badly, congratulations on being braver than I am. If you do it well, congratulations on being braver and smarter. So anything else on graph 3 that we want to talk about, or section 3, I should say? It's not just the graphs. The graphs just make a nice visual here on the camera.
They do. No, I'm good with 3.
Learner performance remains the gold.
This is the one I was talking about with how they define learner performance as student grades. It's right below
before we talk about the specific there, can I ask, is there a reason you would go from percentage here to exact numbers here? Because to me that's really confusing. But is there a reason in your mind you might choose to do that?
How many? Well, it's because their percentages wouldn't be relevant because the number of respondents to the whole survey is around 500. And we're talking about a number down in the 160s, right? So that's not like a statistically significant number. Remember? Because it's like something like 400 odd respondents and only 160 out of that. So again, what I'm saying with like the bad answer choices or the lack of answer choices or however the questions were worded are giving us like really, really bad data back, right? Like the fact that, hold on, let me do some quick math here. 160 divided by, I forget how many
it says over 400 on this, but over 400 could be 401, could be 499, obviously.
We'll just go with like 450. So that it's like a 35%. So if we say only 35% of people are measuring learning performance, it's the same kind of damning numbers that we're used to, right? But the fact that they put student grades versus course scores, like why is course scores separate?
Oh, yeah.
Because if you scroll down a little bit so that folks can see how they define learner performance, for example, changes in on-the-job performance or student grades, 165 respondents.
See, that to me says that is academic. Because otherwise it would be under course scores. Because course scores, I think, is inherently a more kind of corporate L&D speak for grades, right? But we also know it counts
I think
for
so.
nothing.
Yeah.
To be totally clear, that is purely Tom's interpretation through his knowledge of language.
Right.
Therefore,
Well,
take it
and
for what
that's
it's worth.
again, that's the problem, is that there's too much
Mm.
to interpret here, right? If
That's
you
good.
are reporting out and this is supposed to be the simplified version of your report, and we still can't really understand it or what it's trying to say or what it's meaning, and you still have to provide the meaning for us, which is buy our product, buy our product, buy our product. To me, that's not good research.
Yeah, same as I guess like this other section, which is huge, is made up of some very different things like behavior change, course completion rate, business impact, SME and stakeholder satisfaction. I mean, just to clarify, it's one thing measuring learner satisfaction, but SME satisfaction is a new one on me, I've got to say.
Well, and that
Engagement.
it was the most important thing that you measure, right? Because it would appear that, I don't know, were people allowed to answer? Again, this is my problem. Were people allowed to give more than one answer? Were they allowed to explain the different facets? I just, and I have a problem with the fact that they also said course completion and scores are less commonly used, because most of the people I know, that's how they define success. So, that's another thing that we teach in information literacy, is if it goes against what you hear from the people that actually work in the industry, it may not be you, right? Like, it may not be, if I go, this doesn't seem like what I've been hearing from the people I know who work in this industry, from the podcasts that I do, from the conversations that I have, it's more than likely there's a reason for that, right? Like, it's usually not that you're wrong in the survey and know something that you don't, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny actually. Like the stuff I do with ad time. No, if Synthesia can do it, why not me? No, the model we look at in the Evolve Insights course is this idea that you start with kind of human insight, your own view of the world, and making sure you understand what you think reality is in an area. Then you look at data and you gather these, external reports or whatever it might be. Then you adjust human insight based or informed by, not driven by. You don't just take the data as true. You're looking for areas where your worldview and the data disagree. That doesn't then mean that you change your worldview to the data or vice versa. It means it points you to say something here is discrepant. There's something here worth investigating, worth spending some time on. Whereas if your worldview that you have from a human level agrees with all the data, well, then you're right. Congratulations. You don't have to then expend that effort there. But I fear that more commonly, and this is what we find in the workshops, is people say, I have this worldview. The data, I think X, the data says Y. Well, I'll go with the data, Y. We automatically default to the seemingly authoritative knowledge, right, of a data-based report, because some very clever person in a white coat has clearly conducted strenuous investigations here, which could well be true. Like, there are areas where certainly I do that without too much thought. Like when I go to the doctor and the doctor says that is broken arm, and here is how we're going to fix your broken arm, I don't go, well, in my experience, doctor, this is far more likely to be a nosebleed. It's
Right.
I guess, is that maybe, I guess this is very broad at this point. I apologize, listeners, if you're bored of my rambling. Is that part of the challenge here, that there is a danger here because of the perceived authority that data and graphs and charts bring, that we kind of just go, well, clearly the AI tool to use is Synthesia. The way to measure success is student grades. There is a risk here. Is my feeling, but am I getting that right? Because this is, and just to be clear, everyone, we're not setting this up. We haven't discussed this ahead of time. I'm genuinely interested because this is an area where I know I'm not necessarily as informed as I ought to be.
Yeah, so this is not the PhD side of things, but I also used to I used to teach a college course for incoming freshmen on information literacy back when I was a professor. And
Mm.
it was the best way to describe the class is that there was this 19-year-old woman, and she was fantastic, lovely human being. But on the last day of class, we all shared, our takeaways, our reflections on what we had learned that semester. And what she said was, this semester, I learned that not everything on Google is true. And that's the summation of that course. I was very scared and proud, I guess, when that was her reflection on the course. But this is like marketing 101, right? Like creating FOMO, creating this narrative that if you are not using this product, you are missing out. It is the number 2 AI tool used by instructional designers. It is in the top 5 content authoring tools used by instructional designers. Everybody's using it. Everybody's doing it. And if you don't, you're going to be at a disadvantage, right? Like this is just marketing stuff 101. And how else do we create, that same kind of power imbalance in marketing? Well, we create the illusion of expertise, right? We come out with this report and we say that we've done all this research, and we assume that based on the fact that we're presenting it as research and calling it a report and making it very formal, that, like you said, people will respect its authority, right? It's using the logical fallacy of an appeal to authority, right? Like that's how we would break this down. But there's so many different ways that you can poke holes in something. Looking at the source of it, looking at how the data is described. I mean, I think we've broken down a lot of different ways here, right? Like even your point about limitations and mentioning the admitted limitations to the research, right? These are all ways that we look at the validity of the reports that we're seeing. And so I think when we see AI companies talking about AI trends, when we see video companies talking about video-based trends, when we see Udemy talking about skills, right? Like there's something in it for them, right? They're doing this for a reason, and it's to sell their product. And however they choose to do it and why they choose to all do it in December, I don't know, but here we are.
So I guess maybe that opens kind of, I'm aware we've got about 15 minutes left. So one of the we all saw the video. I'm sorry, I've just seen the chat. Yeah, I did. I'll give you a glimpse behind the scene of the YouTube streaming data we get. It's awful. If you ever want to see bad analytics, go to the live analytics screen.
Fantastic.
It's awful. I'm all over the place. This is not the data I want. That's what I want. There we go. So is there value in reading, let's just not just this report, but broadly, do you think there is still value in these, even if they're not, perfectly formed academic sort of research as such?
Okay, so I've spent the whole time kind of poking holes, but there's also reports and research reports that like I've contributed expert quotes to, right? Like that's a common practice, right? That you get asked to comment on a report that's being published, right? On the data that's being like reported out. It's pretty common. And so like I've participated in some really great reports. So I think, yes, I think reading, I don't know, like I don't want to say it's a good idea because I don't want people to do it unless they really want to, because I don't think it's necessary. If like that's your jam though, and you really enjoy reading and you really like, if you're the kind of person who like me is like checking out scholarly journals for funsies, then yeah, sure, of course. But if it's not something like, don't take extra time or make extra space to read these trend reports or to look at these things, because you'll know what's trending if you just spend some time out on social media or the instructional design subreddit or, other places where people are having conversations.
Yeah, and I feel like the last couple of years, I'll stop sharing this. That's kind of been my I won't say gripe with them, but just my concern with them. There seems to be a decreasing rather than increasing number of them that I find genuinely insightful, like something I had not thought about before. It's a bit like when the LPI, they run this event every year, and ahead of it, they're like, what are the 5 biggest challenges you face as an L&D professional? And when it comes out, everyone's like, the LPI have defined these as like, we're L&D professionals, we should already know. And if we disagree, they're wrong. Like, what do we do? How are you letting a vendor marketing group dictate what our 5 largest challenges are?
Yeah.
Like, that makes to me, that's never made sense. Flip side of that, you've got the global sentiment survey. Now, the global sentiment survey, incredibly simple, right? I filled it out like yesterday, and it was like, what are the 3 things you think are going to be really big in 2025? And then it's a couple of word answers and things there afterwards. Maybe 5 questions, one of which is what's your email if you want to put it in so we can send you the report when it's done. Love it. For those who don't know, Don Taylor puts that together. It doesn't overreach. It's very clear that, like, we ask really one question. It's this. We will present you with the answers, and then Don will comment on what that might look like. But there we go. But
exactly.
It's very clear about what it is and what it's for, and it doesn't talk about this product and that product. And quite notably, interestingly, it's sponsored. So I think last year it was sponsored by like Filter and a couple of other industry vendors. But other than the thank you to X, Y, and Z for sponsoring, they're then not mentioned again, which is it kind of proves that it can still work.
Yeah,
because I said, it's expensive, it's time consuming. It doesn't surprise me. It's someone's got to pick up the bill, right? But clearly it can be done, and there is value. Otherwise, these companies wouldn't sponsor it. In creating good quality insight rather than just marketing.
Well, and I think that we're not the only ones having this conversation about this particular report. Like I said, the reason we're talking about it is because it kept showing up in my inbox from different people in L&D going, what the hell is this? Right? Yeah. So I think we do have a good gut check sense. Like, I think we're doing a good job. Like, we're as an industry going, hey, this report wasn't handled well. These are the ones that we normally look at, barring a few kind of like people who wield power where maybe they should or shouldn't that we listen to because they are big names or whatever. Like, that's always going to happen, right? Like, it's just the big brother of L&D, that we deal with. But little things like this, I think, as long as like we keep having these conversations, we keep challenging it, we keep saying, hey, you're not going to pull one over on us. That's really kind of the key.
Yeah. I think that's kind of important. So hopefully, if you're watching this, you can see why we felt it was important to somewhat pivot and bring a slightly different format to today's episode, because this, again, I don't think this sways the minds of many people who have been here for a long time.
No.
I do think someone who's just started in L&D, maybe is in their first role, maybe is just getting started, is very susceptible to this stuff.
Agreed. And that's why I feel like it's important to speak out about it, because I think the people who are in this field, who've been in this field for a long time, who care about what we do and who are still passionate about it and who do want to disrupt and innovate and do all those lovely things, we have a responsibility to help people who are new to see through the bullshit that they're being sold, Absolutely.
It's on that uplifting note, yeah. I mean, I guess we've kind of covered some of them there. Are there any reports you would recommend? If someone's just gone, oh my God, that's me, so I shouldn't necessarily go to this. like my recommendation is the Global Sentiment Survey. I think it's fantastic. If you're in the UK specifically, the Open University also publish a bunch of stuff. Now, their stuff is not exclusive to the UK, but a lot of the conversation in their stuff is very UK centric because they're UK based. So that'd be my one observation with them, is that if you're, I think maybe US, Western Europe, it's probably still very accessible, very relevant. Outside of those areas, you're probably going to come up with a lot of this is interesting but not really relevant kind of results with it. Those are kind of the two places that I can reliably get good information. I think is how some other people occasionally come out with something good, but they're the two that I can see and go, okay, I don't need to go into this with like, you know, X-ray specs on, looking for the dodginess behind the curtain. Anything you would want to put on that list?
Of course, I can't think of any off the top of my head. I do know, though, that IBS TPI was looking to update their instructional design standards. I used them for my dissertation research. People don't often look at them, but they slightly vary from ATDs, which is interesting. If they do update those competencies, which I think they're supposed to at the beginning of next year, that would be a helpful thing to look at, because they do send out a survey to a massive amount of people to get that data.
Cool. Well, it's not something I've come across before, so I am on my way to go and check that out.
Because it hasn't been updated in a really long time.
Even so, I think just today I was having a chat with someone and complaining about our general lack of like professional standardization.
Yeah, and it's all paywalled, so it's great that they put all those nice. They'll sum it up, but a lot of it's paywalled.
Right. Yeah. It's very, very interesting, but awesome. Well, look, we'll loop back round to our usual format and say, hey, what's going on next month? What are you looking forward to in the month to come, other than obviously Christmas?
Ooh, I am doing oh gosh, I'm gonna get the date wrong if I don't look at it. Hold on, let me peek at my email and get the exact date right. Oh my gosh, of course. It's December 12th. I thought it was, but I wasn't sure. I am participating in the Offbeat Sparks end of the year questions for L&D to answer in 2025. That'll be a fun one. It is not based on research. It is just based on questions that experts thought it would be a good idea to bring up. We're going to do like a 5-minute presentation on our question and leave time for some questions, and it's going to be a great time.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to my last webinar of the year, which is super exciting. And it's with eLearning Brothers. I was actually their backup speaker for DevLearn in case anyone dropped out. And now they're putting all their DevLearn speakers. No one dropped out, which is, I'm not going to lie. It was like, that's a real shame. And it's like, yeah, it's a real shame. I got to go on this amazing trip and didn't have to do any speaking. Damn. Yeah. But now they're putting them all online, which is really cool. Nice. So they've invited me to go and deliver that. And it's actually a 30-minute version of my data decision-making workshop. Nice. So it's kind of the key highlights from that. So if you enjoyed this, then that might be it won't be as good, but it might be worth attending. There'll be no insights from Heidi, just the self-described layperson. So, you know, it's like expert insights without the expert, the best kind of L&D insights.
We love it.
It's like that classic. So where's the SME? The SM what? That's you don't need one of those.
We just have an old encyclopedia in the corner.
What else could you need? Just pull out the Britannica in its old kind of blue leather wrap, and you know, exactly. Lovely. That's but no, so that's gonna be really cool. I'm looking forward to that last webinar of the year. Amazing. Well, Heidi, thank you so much for having me. Joining today, and obviously sharing your expertise around this, because I think it is I don't know, it's not on any like L&D job requirement list to be able to do this stuff, and it's kind of important. So thank you, thank you everyone for joining us as well, and taking a look at the YouTube metrics with me. Now you can see when someone goes, just use the metrics to guide your next video decision. You go, yeah, great, the metrics. Woo. Exciting stuff, and we will see you next month here for the final ID update of the year. It will be a little bit earlier next month because I go on holiday I shut down my business and go on holiday as of the 18th, and as much as I love you all, I am not tuning in from somewhere bizarre to do a live stream.
We're not doing that. It's gonna be like in a couple weeks.
Yeah, exactly. Well, but on that note, if you know what we should talk about in a couple of weeks, other than the obvious launch of the survey that I'll backtrack and we'll start organizing, we'll awesome. Well, thank you all for joining us. Have an amazing couple of weeks, and we shall speak to you again soon. Bye.